How's it going? Today I'm going to talk about stocking up on food for relatively cheap for preppers and stuff like that are on a budget. Um, Rice right here. We got 3 pounds of rice for like $2. Real cheap, good for you, loaded with carbs, which is stuff that you need in order to have the strength and the motivation to be able to want to do anything. It's got a decent shelf life on it. Another idea that I did come up with was we're eventually going to get those food safe buckets and with the liners and stuff in them and start stocking this up and putting it in there. We'll hopefully have a video about that in a later on period. White rice is good for you, but that's even better than that. Brown rice. Brown rice is just as good, it's even better for you. It's got the whole grain and stuff in it. Again, loaded with carbs. Uh, got a little bit of protein and stuff in there. Not too much, not a real significant amount of fat, which is, again, in a survival situation, you're going to want quite a bit of fat because that's, again, a lot where your energy comes from. Um, Again, this is relatively cheap, not even $2 for 2 pounds. That's pretty cheap if you ask me, especially if you're on a real budget. You don't have to go out there and, buy hundreds of pounds of this stuff. Just start small and then just kind of build your way up. And then another thing that's relatively cheap is beans. Beans are real cheap. They're good for you. High in protein. Not a real significant amount of carbs. There's a few in there. For more energy. But again, it's cheap. Stuff's real cheap. It has a decent shelf life on it. And if you build up a little bit at a time, eventually you'll get to the point where you have a lot of it, and you'll be able to ration it a lot better. And this stuff right here keeps you a lot fuller, a lot longer. Same with the rice. You won't be eating as much, and you'll be able to have the energy to get you going. And then the other thing is these right here. These are an absolute lifesaver. You spend like $2, a little over $2 to get 12 packages of ramen noodles. These right here got a pretty good shelf life on them. And look, you just bought 12 meals. That's 3 a day. If you ration it right, you'll get 4 days just out of this one container right here if you're by yourself. So that right there, 12 meals for 4 days and $2. I mean, that's roughly 50 cents a day just to live. I mean, that's relatively really cheap. They're decent for you. They got a lot of sodium and stuff in them, which is good, especially if you sweat a lot. Got some carbohydrates in there, protein. Got a good, decent amount of fat content in there too. So that, on a survival diet, I mean, honestly, ramen noodles are just really the go-to, especially when you're on a prepper that's on a relatively small budget. You just don't have a lot of money to spend. Then water. Water's also great. You need this for survival. The recommended daily amount is like, a gallon of water, which is like, a lot. I mean, that's a lot of water for one person every day. But if you happen to have just like bottles and stuff left over and stuff like that, you reuse them. I mean, who says you have to go out and, after you buy a case or something like that, reuse these bottles? I mean, there's nothing wrong with them as long as you wash them out, if you put something else in them. And milk jugs. Most people just throw away their milk jugs. And honestly, as long as you, rinse them out and stuff like that and everything, sanitize them, whatever, you could also reuse those too, which is, you're reusing and being more self-sufficient now because you're reusing what you already bought instead of just going out and, throwing it away or whatever. And then, when it comes to putting the water back in the containers, I don't know how much it is, but bleach is another good way to purify water that's undrinkable, or just put a little bit in there just to help it not get stale on you after a long period of time. But that's pretty much it. This right here is probably the best preppers on a budget for food and food storage. Canned goods are relatively cheap, which you saw in my last video. You can pick up those really cheap off-brand stuff for like little to nothing, and they have a decent shelf life, 2, 3 years, maybe as long as the cane lid's not, kind of bulging out of the top there, and they're still good. But that's pretty much it. Uh, just comment below if you have any questions or uh, suggestions. Like the video and subscribe to our channel. And always have a good day.